I first knew him as the man who measured mornings by case numbers and coffee spoons. He walked the courthouse halls with the steady rhythm of a metronome, necktie aligned like a compass needle, eyes fixed on the next argument waiting to be made. Too many, he was the picture of order. To me, he felt like a winter tree, all branches and angles, the sap of feelings sealed beneath a careful bark. He believed fairness lived inside, neat paragraphs and polished citations. If the law said turn left, he turned without asking who had fallen in the road. He had earned this posture the hard way, climbing from late nights and cramped apartments into a corner office that smelled faintly of leather and resolve. His victories lined the shelves like small trophies of certainty. Clients came to him when the world felt messy and wanted to be cleaned. I sat most days at the clerk's desk, watching stories arrive in envelopes and leave as rulings stamped in blue. He moved among those papers like a surgeon with a bright lamp. He was polite, never unkind, but distant in the exact way frost is distant from the flower beneath it. When he spoke to me, it was to confirm a filing, to note a statute, to ensure that nothing strayed beyond the boundaries of what could be proved. There was comfort in his predictability. In a world where grief walked in on unsteady legs, he kept his footing. I admired that, the way a sailor admires a lighthouse. Yet even from my desk I could see the cost. Joy rarely found a seat beside him. He treated a courtroom like a scale, and he was devoted to the weights, never the hands that trembled while placing them. He had a habit of standing at the window before hearings, tracing the skyline with a gaze that never quite softened. Outside, pigeons fluttered from the courthouse steps whenever the doors swung open and a gust of human worry poured out. Inside, he checked his watch, reviewed his notes, and built his arguments brick by brick. If a memory tried to slip in, he mortared it over with logic. I did not dislike him. I simply wondered whether certainty had become his shield and his prison. In quiet moments, I imagined a younger version of him who once reached for fairness the way a child reaches for sunlight through a curtain. Somewhere along the climb, the curtain had thickened. Somewhere, warmth had become a risk he could not bill. It happened on a grey afternoon, when the courthouse felt heavier than usual. The air was thick with the sound of footsteps, murmurs, and the occasional echo of a gavel. He had just finished arguing a case involving a dispute over property lines. His voice sharp, his points crisp as falling glass. For him, it was another victory. For the family leaving the courtroom in tears, it was the unraveling of a dream. He watched them pass, face unreadable, eyes fixed forward. To him, the law had spoken, and that was enough. But later that week, he found himself in a setting where laws carried no weight. At a small gathering hosted by a colleague, he sat in the corner, glass in hand, scanning the room as though every conversation were an argument waiting to be passed. That was when a child wandered over. She couldn't have been more than 9, her shoes scuffed, her hair tied in uneven ribbons. She looked at him with a curiosity that only children can sustain. She had overheard the adults praising him, calling him brilliant, a man of justice. Her question came softly, almost carelessly, yet it struck with the precision of lightning. She asked why, if he worked for fairness, some people still left the courthouse crying. He stared at her, words catching like stones in his throat. The question was too simple to dismiss, too innocent to deflect. He tried to explain that fairness meant following rules, that sometimes rules did not leave everyone smiling. But the child tilted her head, frowning, as if she could not understand how something called fairness could hurt so much. Then she ran off to chase her friends, leaving him with silence, heavy as an unspoken verdict. That night, he found no rest. Her words echoed between the walls of his mind, uninvited but unrelenting. He recalled the family from earlier, the father's hand gripping his son's shoulder, the mother's quiet sob as the ruling fell. He had not thought of them beyond their role in a legal puzzle. Now, he could not stop thinking of them as people, carrying their loss home like a burden no ruling could lighten. For the first time in years, he questioned the very ground beneath his steps. Was fairness truly the cold obedience to written law? Or was there something missing, something he had locked away behind years of training and pride? He tried to push the thought aside, but it returned, gentle and persistent, the way a child's voice lingers long after the sound has gone. In the weeks that followed, he moved through his work with the same measured steps, but something beneath the surface had shifted. Each time he stood in court, the child's question returned, threading itself through every argument he made. He began to notice things he had once ignored: the way voices cracked when recounting loss, the tired eyes of mothers clutching papers, the trembling hands of fathers trying to appear strong. These were not details the law required him to consider, yet they clung to him like shadows he could not shake. One case in particular unsettled him. A tenant faced eviction after falling behind on rent due to medical bills. The law was clear. The landlord had every right to reclaim the property. By the book, the decision was simple. But as he listened to the woman speak about choosing between medicine and rent, he felt a weight pressing against the armor he had worn for decades. He still delivered the ruling, still aligned himself with the letter of the law. But when he saw her leave, shoulders bent as if carrying the world, he felt the question return. If this is fairness, why does it break people? Nights grew restless. He found himself walking the streets after long days, the glow of city lamps flickering against wet pavement. He replayed arguments in his mind, not to refine them, but to ask himself what they meant. For years, he had thought of justice as balance, an equation solved by applying rules with precision. Now he saw the gap spaces where human pain leaked through like water slipping between stones. Slowly, his approach began to soften. He listened more closely, not just to the words, but to the silences between them. He started asking questions he had never asked before. What would be fair, not only in law, but in life? He found ways within the limits of his role to guide outcomes toward mercy, to suggest compromises, to advocate for resolutions that left dignity intact. Colleagues noticed the change. Some said he was becoming sentimental, less sharp, but others saw something different, a depth that had not been there before. He no longer treated fairness as a rule book to be guarded, but as a living thing that breathed through the people it touched. The child's question had not simply unsettled him, it had cracked open a door he did not know existed. One evening, standing once more by the courthouse window, he watched the city spread beneath him. Instead of seeing only structures and cases, he imagined the lives moving through them, messy, fragile, hopeful. For the first time in years, his gaze softened. Fairness, he realized, was not a finish line marked by a judge's gavel. It was an ongoing choice to see, to listen, to care. The child had vanished back into her world of play, never knowing the mark she left. But he carried her words forward, quiet as a prayer, shaping the man he was becoming. Fairness was no longer something he enforced, it was something he lived. Sometimes the greatest lessons come from the smallest voices. The lawyer who once measured fairness only by rules discovered that true justice breathes in compassion, in listening, in seeing beyond the written line. His story reminds us that life often asks us to balance not only what is legal but also what is kind. And maybe that child's question was meant for all of us, to ask ourselves if our choices leave others whole or broken. If this story touched you, share your thoughts, like and subscribe to Mindset Tales for more journeys of change and reflection.